The house had never felt so full, and yet so empty. That evening began like any other family gathering. The air carried the warm scent of spices from the kitchen, oil sizzling, cardamom tea boiling over. Laughter bounced off the walls, familiar and careless. I stood near the dining table, arranging plates, doing what I had always done, holding the family together in quiet, invisible ways. Then the front door opened, not with urgency, not with fear. It opened slowly, deliberately, as if whatever stood on the other side already knew it would be allowed in. I looked up. A woman stood there. She was young, glowing in a way that only pregnancy brings, one hand resting gently on her swollen belly. Her head was slightly bowed, eyelashes lowered, lips pressed together as though she were ashamed. But her posture told a different story. She was not afraid, she was claiming space. Behind her stood my brother-in-law. "This is her," he said, voice tight, eyes darting around the room. "She's pregnant." The word hit the house like a slap. Pregnant. My mother-in-law's hand flew to her chest. Someone whispered a prayer. A glass slipped from trembling fingers and shattered on the floor. Questions erupted all at once. Who is she? How could you? What about your wife? What about our honor? Chaos filled the room, but I wasn't watching them. I was watching my husband, because while shock and anger twisted every other face, his expression didn't change. His eyes were locked on her, not briefly, not accidentally. His gaze lingered, soft, searching, intimate. The kind of look you give someone when history already exists between you. The kind of look that doesn't need words. My fingers tightened around the plate I was holding. Why is he looking at her like that? The pregnant woman finally lifted her eyes. For a split second they met his, and something passed between them, too quick for anyone else to notice. But I saw it, and in that moment a cold fear slid down my spine. The living room turned into a courtroom. Accusations flew, tears followed. My sister-in-law's cries echoed from another room, raw and broken. My brother-in-law kept insisting he had no choice, that the baby was innocent, that the woman needed a place to stay. "She will stay here," my mother-in-law said finally, her voice shaking but firm, "until the baby is born." The pregnant woman's shoulders relaxed. Relief crossed her face. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just her entering the house. This was her entering our lives. Dinner was a disaster. No one ate properly. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor. Every movement felt heavy, forced. The woman sat quietly, her hand on her belly, while everyone avoided looking at her. Except my husband. He pushed a glass of water toward her, asked if she felt tired, suggested she sit more comfortably. Each gesture felt like a small blade. He hadn't asked me how I was feeling. He hadn't noticed my shaking hands. He hadn't looked at me at all. That night, when the house finally fell silent, I confronted him. "Why were you staring at her?" I asked softly, afraid of my own question. He didn't even look surprised. "You're imagining things," he said, pulling away. "Don't start drama now." Drama? The word crushed whatever was left of my breath. I lay awake long after he fell asleep, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment at the door over and over again. Her face, his eyes, that silent exchange. Some betrayals don't announce themselves. They walk in quietly, stand in your home, and smile. And that was the night I understood the door hadn't just opened for her. It had closed on me. The morning after she arrived, the house woke up before I did. I could hear it breathing whispers in the corridors, doors opening and closing softly, cups clinking in the kitchen. The kind of sounds that told me life was moving forward without asking how I felt about it. When I stepped out of the bedroom, she was already there. Sitting at the dining table, in my place, she smiled at me, gentle, cautious, almost apologetic. One hand rested on her belly as if to remind everyone why she was untouchable. "Good morning," she said softly. I nodded, unsure of my own voice. My mother-in-law hovered around her, fussing over breakfast choices, warning her not to stand too long. My brother-in-law watched anxiously, guilt written all over his face. The house had adjusted overnight, bending itself around her presence. Only I remained stiff and out of place, and then my husband walked in. His eyes found her immediately. "Not me, her. Did you sleep well?" he asked. She nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes, thank you, thank you." Two words that landed like stones in my chest. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was being sensitive, that circumstances demanded kindness, but betrayal has a rhythm. You begin to recognize it in the smallest beats. He brought her fruit in the afternoon, carefully sliced. He spoke to her in a softer tone, one he hadn't used with me in years. When she complained of dizziness, he stood up instantly. When I mentioned a headache that evening, he barely looked up from his phone. "Take a pill," he muttered. I swallowed my pain along with my pride. At night, when I lay beside him, the space between us felt wider than the bed itself. His body faced away from mine. His phone never left his hand. One night it buzzed. He turned the screen away too quickly. "Who is that?" I asked. "No one," he replied. "Just family matters." Family, the word tasted bitter. The whispers started soon after. I heard them behind closed doors, in hushed voices that stopped when I entered the room. "She's too calm." Maybe she already knew. Poor thing, but what can she do now? I became a shadow in my own home, present but unseen. People looked through me as though I had already been replaced. Even she noticed. One afternoon, she approached me when no one else was around. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she said, tears filling her eyes. "Life just happened." I studied her face, beautiful, fragile, carefully composed. "And yet," I replied quietly, "you're here." She had no answer. The final crack came when I saw it with my own eyes. I returned early from the market, arms heavy with bags, feet aching. As I entered the hallway, I heard laughter, soft, familiar. I stopped. He was standing close to her, his hand brushing her arm as he showed her something on his phone. She laughed, head tilted toward him, comfortable, intimate. They didn't see me at first. When he finally looked up, something flashed across his face. Not guilt, but fear of being caught. I understood then, this wasn't about compassion. This was about connection. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried without sound, pressing my fist to my mouth so no one would hear me breaking. I stared at my reflection, eyes red, face pale, love draining out of me drop by drop. I had begged silently for years to be seen, and now I knew the truth. He hadn't stopped loving me because I changed. He stopped because his heart had already wandered elsewhere. Some betrayals don't scream, they whisper, slowly eroding you until one day you wake up and realize you have been alone for a very long time. I didn't wake up strong. I woke up empty. The tears were gone, as if my body had finally decided it could not afford them anymore. My chest still ached, but it was a dull, distant pain like a wound that had stopped bleeding and started hardening. That scared me more than the crying ever had. I moved through the house quietly, mechanically. I cooked. I cleaned. I smiled when required. No one noticed the change, because no one was looking closely enough to see that something inside me had shifted. Except him, he sensed it. Not because he cared, but because I had stopped reacting. "Why are you so quiet these days?" he asked one evening, his tone almost suspicious. "I'm tired," I replied. It wasn't a lie. I stopped asking questions, stopped waiting for explanations, stopped hoping he would suddenly remember who I was to him. Instead, I started watching. I noticed how his phone never left his hand, how he stepped outside to answer calls, how his voice softened when he spoke to her and hardened when he spoke to me. I noticed how she avoided my eyes now, no longer pretending innocence. I noticed how the house leaned toward them, slowly rewriting its loyalties. And I listened. People reveal the truth when they think you are broken enough not to matter. One afternoon, my sister-in-law, her eyes hollow from betrayal, sat beside me. "They think you don't know," she whispered. "Know what?" I asked, already bracing myself. She hesitated. "That this didn't start recently, that your husband, he knew her before." The words didn't shock me. They settled, like confirmation of something my soul had already accepted. That night, I stood alone on the balcony, the city lights flickering like distant promises. For years, I had bent myself into the shape of everyone else's expectations. A good wife, a good daughter-in-law, a silent supporter. And what had it earned me? Disrespect, replacement, erasure. I placed a hand over my heart and made a quiet vow. I will not beg anymore. Strength didn't come as anger. It came as clarity. I began to take care of myself, not loudly, not dramatically, but deliberately. I dressed better, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself I existed. I spent time outside the house, rediscovering the woman I had been before I learned to shrink. I started writing everything down: dates, moments, overheard conversations. Not for revenge fueled by rage, but for truth anchored in facts. And with every note, I felt my spine straighten. He noticed the change. "You're different," he said one night. I smiled faintly. "People grow." He didn't like that answer. "Men who benefit from your silence fear your awakening." The pregnant woman avoided me completely now. No apologies, no explanations, just distance. She had won her place in the house, but I realized something crucial. She hadn't won peace. She lived surrounded by tension, by judgment, by a love built on betrayal. And that kind of love is always hungry, always unstable. I felt no envy, only resolve. For the first time, I imagined a future that didn't include him. And instead of fear, I felt relief. I didn't plan to scream or destroy the house. I didn't want chaos. I wanted dignity. I wanted to walk away whole. And that decision, that quiet, steady choice to choose myself, was the moment my tears finally turned into strength. The day I decided to leave, the house was unusually calm. No shouting, no whispers, just the heavy stillness of people pretending nothing was broken. I moved through the room slowly, touching familiar corners: the window where I used to wait for him, the kitchen where I cooked meals that were never thanked for, the bedroom that had long stopped feeling like mine. I packed quietly, not in anger, not in haste, with intention. The family gathered that evening, as they often did. The pregnant woman sat on the sofa, surrounded by careful concern. My brother-in-law stood nearby, protective and restless. My husband sat across the room, distant, unreadable. I cleared my throat. Every head turned toward me. "I need to say something," I began, my voice calm despite the storm in my chest. They waited. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I simply spoke the truth, clean, measured, undeniable. I spoke of the lingering looks, the secret calls, the history that predated her arrival. I spoke of neglect, of emotional abandonment, of how love had quietly left our marriage long before this chaos entered the house. Silence followed, thick, suffocating. My mother-in-law's face drained of color. My brother-in-law looked down, shame heavy on his shoulders. The pregnant woman began to cry, but no one rushed to comfort her this time. And my husband, he said nothing. Because, for the first time, there was nothing left for him to deny. "I won't fight for a place where I am no longer chosen," I said softly. "I deserve more than silence and shadows." I picked up my bag. No one stopped me. That was answer enough. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. The sky stretched wide above me, no longer pressing down on my chest. Each step away from that house felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had lost. Freedom didn't come with fireworks. It came with peace. Months passed. I rebuilt my life quietly. I found my laughter again, soft at first, then stronger. I slept without tears. I learned that love does not make you feel invisible, and loyalty does not require you to disappear. I heard things, of course. The house was no longer calm. Trust had fractured. Arguments replaced whispers. The love born from betrayal proved fragile, always doubting, always defensive. Regret settled where certainty once lived. And he reached out once. I didn't realize what I was losing. He wrote. I read the message, then I closed it. Some lessons arrived too late. My revenge was not cruelty, it was absence. It was becoming so whole that their actions no longer defined me. It was choosing dignity over desperation, peace over punishment. I didn't ruin them. They did that themselves. One evening, as I stood in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She stood taller. Her eyes were clear, her smile real. I had survived betrayal without becoming bitter, and that I realized was the sweetest revenge of all. Because I didn't just walk away, I walked forward, herb